All right, welcome to another expert interview. Always love when we can provide value, especially on topics that are critical. And this topic is critical on the personal and professional business side. Today, we're going to talk a lot about healthcare and health insurance. And as always, let's jump straight in. Joe, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us who you are and what you do?
Hey, nice to be here. This is my first podcast. My name is Joe Lovely. I'm originally from Kentucky, so that's where the accent is coming from. Moved here in May of 2020. Started in health insurance back in September, but I've been an insurance agent in a larger capacity since July of 2021. I really found my calling with health insurance. It's a super gratifying industry to be in. It's really great to help people with something that they don't understand and, just loving life right now.
Love that, man. And you just wrapped up your kind of main open enrollment season. And so let's talk about kind of the annual timeline for health insurance, because there are some important windows of time that matter. So could you tell people like when they should be paying more attention and just kind of give us that overview?
Yeah. I mean, people should obviously pay attention all the time, but the main dates that you need to worry about, especially for older folks, because Medicare is super strict with enrollment periods, and there's multiple throughout the year, depending on who you are and what you do. But the main one is annual election period, AEP, and it goes from October 15th to December 7th, right? And you can switch from original Medicare to Medicare Advantage. You can make all the changes you want in that amount of time, and the last one is the one that sticks. As far as Medicare is concerned, after the first of the year, so from January 1st to March 31st, you have open enrollment with Medicare, which is confusing, I know. And you can go from Medicare Advantage plan to Medicare Advantage plan. So you can actually make one more change after the first of the year if you're already on like Senior Care Plus, Prominent, stuff like that. For under 65, if you're the type of person that has to buy their own insurance, or if it's not affordable at your job, that will go from November 1st to January 15th, which is this Sunday. And that will be the deadline to get enrolled for under 65 health insurance. And that's pretty straightforward.
Love that. So it is important. Obviously, reach out whenever. If you guys have questions, reach out and have the conversation, but know that there are certain windows during the year where stuff can happen, and sometimes it may be delayed due to your exact circumstance. Now, one thing we hear a lot, and I know I referred someone to you that asked this question, right? They're like, I'm shopping for health insurance and it's just extremely expensive, and I'm self-employed. And then they were like really shocked at the solution you were able to provide. So can we kind of talk about that myth that, I mean, yes, it is probably expensive, depending on terms, but can we talk about like, yes, there are options, and kind of talk me through that scenario?
So yeah, self-employed folks, that especially like realtors, mortgage brokers, self-employed people that, make decent money. In the past, they haven't been able to get a tax credit, right? And and my dad is a truck driver, owner operator, small business owner, and has been since 1996. And I didn't grow up with health insurance for that exact reason, because you don't get the employer contribution. Now, what that means is for people that are too rich for Medicaid, but too poor to be able to pay the entire premium, is they end up in things that are not insurance, hospital indemnity plans and stuff like that. And it's just extremely expensive. But because of the American Rescue Plan signed by, right after COVID, signed by the president, they actually fixed what's called the family glitch. And I'm not going to get too far into the weeds of what that means. But what that means is if the cost of the insurance is more than 9.12% of your income, then you qualify for a tax credit. And I'm pretty sure I know which customer you're talking about, but they're my biggest win. And it was a family of three that had a household income that they paid taxes on of $250,000 a year. And I got them $800 a month off of their health insurance premiums. Blew them away. And the good part about that is it really allows me to help the upstart, moderately successful business owner, because they're still in that in-between stage, and they got a lot of expenses they got to worry about. And health insurance is definitely one of them that they would cut first, just to be able to run their business. And they have access to that tax credit now that they didn't before in most cases.
Love that. And I love that that is the exact case. And, I remember hearing her say, like, I didn't know that existed and it shocked me. And so my encouragement every time I'm talking to someone that I think is on the critical vendor list, right? And insurance agents are 100% on the critical vendor list is, guys, you got to remember your insurance agent doesn't cost you money, right?
Yeah.
So you don't pay to go to a consultation, right? And so as you're sitting there making decisions, right, go find a broker, which Joe is, right, who can shop everything and go tell them your situation. Hey, this is where I'm at. Be open and honest. I can afford this. I can't afford that. I'm worried about this coverage. I have this need. And let Joe do the work, right? Because he's going to find you the best solution. And then he's going to place you with what works for you because he wants to retain your business forever. And then those insurance companies take care of Joe, not you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that you brought that up because I'm pretty sure it's literally illegal for me to charge for my services on the health insurance side. Now, I'm also in another capacity. I'm a farmer's agent, and it's home and auto and pretty traditional stuff. And I get a piece of whenever you pay your bill on that side of the business. But on this side of the business, it doesn't matter whether you go to me, the guy down the street, or direct to the carrier. You're going to get the same deal. So it makes my process purely consultative. And what I love about it is that I'm 100% in control of my competitive advantage because all I got to do is be the biscuits and gravy Southern boy, like caring about people, right? Which is how I was raised. And I think that when I first started, that's what's so gratifying about this industry and this side of the insurance world because it literally doesn't cost you anything. And so it doesn't matter. And I have a product for everybody, all the way down people just afraid of losing their Medicaid and they're not doing very well monetarily in life, or people that make $250,000 a year as evidenced before, and even people with work coverage too. I have a buddy of mine in BNI that it was going to cost him $1,000 a month to add himself and his two kids onto his wife's insurance plan at her job. Well, I mean, that was way over their budget. That was way over that 9.12%. And we were able to get them a plan for $14 a month. So from $1,000 to $1,400 a month. And now his kids are covered. And they weren't before. And so even if you have a decent sized family and you have work coverage too, because employers aren't required to contribute any money to your family's expenses. They only have to contribute 50% to your expenses as the employee. So therefore it could spin over that 9.12% pretty quick. At the end of the day, it's up to me to parse out those hairs and split those hairs and do those things. And it really is enjoyable for me because I get to look at all those scary numbers and tell you a story about what those numbers actually mean.
The work example is interesting. Let's go there because I think people think that's their only option, right? I think that they think this is what my work sent me, and therefore I get to choose from these three things that my company decided to offer. And that's all there is. And that's so far from the truth. So, how does that work? Like, what if my work does offer me, three plans and none of the plans seem right for my situation? Like, can I go shop outside of that, or do I have to take what my work offers?
Well, no, you don't. And the way you have to figure it is you got to figure out what they contribute and what your cost will be for you and your family. Okay. And if that total number that you pay after their contribution is more than 9% of your gross income, then you qualify for the tax credit. Their coverage is not affordable. It doesn't meet affordability standards. And you have a couple of options. You can take you and the rest of your family off of that coverage and go over to the exchange, or you can stay on your work coverage because group coverage, let's be honest, is actually richer and has more coverages, and it's a richer plan than individual coverage. So you might not want it, like if you have some health concerns but your family doesn't, you might want to stay where you're at and then put your family on the exchange just to have them some coverage, and you can do that too. But there's a lot of different ways you can do it. But large families are a huge untapped and a huge gap in education when it comes to this, because they fixed what I called earlier the family glitch, because they didn't use to figure it on how much the employees premium was. They figured it just on the dependents and the spouse, but now they include the employees premiums as well to kind of fix that problem, because now a lot more people are eligible for it, and they do have options, and it's a really good thing to have.
Love it. Let's talk about HSAs. I think it's something that people don't understand, and it's probably an option that they might see somewhere. Like, what is an HSA, and when should someone possibly go that direction, or when, like, what scenario does that make sense?
So an HSA is a health savings account, and basically it's an investment account, a lot of times set up through your work or through a bank, and a lot of times it's paid into pre-tax. And what it does is it grows in the market, and you use that money for health expenses. Now, the good thing about an HSA is if you start it early enough, and the interest rates on it are crazy, you can actually make a lot of money with it. If you start one early enough, by the time you get to your 55 to 65 years old, which is the tail end of you being in under 65 insurance before you hit Medicare, your costs are going to go way up, right? And you can use that money that grew in the market to pay for that. And all you would need to do to qualify for it is to have what's called a high deductible health plan. And a high deductible health plan there's a lot of different metrics to actually make it eligible, but essentially, you just have a higher deductible, and those sorts of things the idea is that you're letting the market's money and the interest that you're making on this money pay for your health insurance, rather than you just coming out of pocket for it.
It's something I want people to consider and think about, because I know, being a young entrepreneur, it was something I always looked into, because when I looked at like how often do I go to the doctor, it was like not a ton. And so it's like, well, what can I do to leverage this cash I'm gonna have to pay somewhere, right?
Mm.
And so like, what can I do with that money? So I just want that seed planted for those that are like, I'm looking for other options. Something I know I've talked to Aaron a lot about, I think that's worth mentioning, is there's a lot of different and specialty products that are worth talking about. I know like an accident plan is something that I love to make sure people are aware of, because it can fit into a lot of scenarios. So let's talk about that. What's an accident plan, and why should someone, be aware of it?
Yeah, so an accident plan, well, there's accident, critical illness, and AD&D, or accidental death and dismemberment, which is super morbid, and that's what insurance is, right? And those are the three main ones, and I like to think of it as insurance on your insurance, right? So essentially, like for example, we have a really good product state, or what used to be National General before they got bought out. It's called TrioMed. So it has all three components of that. It has accident, critical illness, and AD&D, and those three things can be bought at pretty much a fixed rate, depending on your zip code. Really, it can be bought at a fixed rate, and it's got three different tiers. So you have like a $2,000, a $5,000, and a $10,000 max benefit. Okay. And those don't coordinate with your health insurance whatsoever. So essentially, if you buy the $10,000 plan and you're in an HSA plan and you have a $10,000 deductible, right? Because you got a high deductible health plan, you could actually, if you get into a car accident, or if you like to ride motorcycles or something, and you end up with a big bill, you can use that TrioMed plan, and that will actually be enough to cover your deductible or max out of pocket. And it's essentially insurance on your insurance. And what that allows you to do is pick a lower tier health plan that maybe has a higher deductible than you want, but in the event of something unplanned, you can actually use that money to cover that larger deductible and save money. And you can make a bronze plan behave like a silver plan by using that, or you can make a silver plan behave like a gold plan by using that as well. And we talk about that with group too, because it can actually save the employer money on the back end by doing some financial wizardry. But even on the individual side, it's just, you always worry about, okay, you look at the deductible and it's super high and you're like, oh man, what am I going to do? Well, get that TrioMed plan. And then if you get cancer, if you get in a car accident, or if you lose a limb because of a freak accident, those three things are covered, and they'll pay out X amount that you set the plan up for, and then that will cover your deductible.
Again, another thing I want people to just hear, right? I think that it's that strategy, and it is so complex. Health insurance is phenomenally complex. I mean, insurance in general is very complex, and cheapest is not always best, but there are ways to lower your cost and still provide protection. And that's true in all insurances, right? Like you can go cheaper, but you need to understand what you're sacrificing. And then in this example, like we could go cheaper, but we can hedge against that with this other product and still maybe smaller out of pocket than we would be if we were buying a gold plan or something higher. So I like that people can hear that and kind of think through, what am I in and what could I do? And just know that there's some other options out there for them.
Yeah, and another caveat to that would be, with those ancillary products, I can get those any time of the year. They're not time bound. They're not bound by those open enrollment periods or anything like that. So if you have work coverage that's XYZ, and you can still get a Trio Med plan any time of the year. And you were talking about the complexity. There's one word track. There's one like line I use with my customers when they kind of apologize for not understanding something, and I say, look, in health insurance, it's intentionally confusing, and that's why I have a job.
Well, that's it. That's why you hire experts, right? It's your job to do continuing ed and understand policies and when stuff changes and tax advantages show up. And like you're supposed to know that. And, I think what I want people to understand is there are professionals out there that can help you. And the insurance world is somewhere you should heavily lean into, right? And it's not a set and forget it. And this is something I need people to hear, especially in the business world, but on the personal side too, right? Like, don't just choose an insurance plan and then never think about it, because if you get married, if you have kids, if you change jobs, if you become self-employed, all of these things can trigger moments when you need to reconsider what you're covered for and what you're enrolled in. So let's talk about that. Say you leave a job, terminated, or you quit. How does that work? Like, how do I, like, what's my coverage?
So obviously you have, when you're with a company, if you're there for a certain amount of time and you qualify for what's called COBRA, COBRA is basically you get to keep your current employer benefits, but then they don't contribute anything anymore. And most of the time they contribute half. So then your insurance premiums double, right? Now you have another option. Don't sign the COBRA paperwork, and then you get on Nevada Health Link and you say, okay, my coverage ends on this date, and then we can get you coverage through Nevada Health Link with that tax credit. Now, technically, you don't make any money, right? Because you don't have a job right now. You're in between jobs, right? We're not talking about like somebody that is quitting their job and going self-employed. We're just talking about somebody who's in between jobs. You can apply for Medicaid, but a lot of times if you have assets and you have money in your bank account and you're pretty stable, you're not going to be able to get approved for Medicaid. But what we can say is you expect to make X amount this year, and this is how much you've made so far, and this is why you're applying for coverage, and then they'll be able to get you taken care of. And what's good about that is when you start that new job, a lot of times there's going to be a 30, 60-day wait on getting eligible for benefits on the new job. And with that being said, you can actually be covered for that amount of time. And then the date that your benefits kick in, we just cancel the policy and move on. Or if it's not affordable, we keep your policy and congratulations, you're set. You know what I mean? Also, you have 30 days. And like, this is something I want people to hear. If you get married, if your income changes, you get a big raise, if you move to a different zip code, any big changes that affect your eligibility, you have 30 days to make that change. You got 30 days to let me know what's going on so we can either get your new child covered or your spouse covered or whatever it is. We got 30 days to get that change done, and it's definitely not set it and forget it. And every single year with my customers, I actually do a review. I set up an appointment. I do a review either over the phone just to see how the plan went, whether they have any questions or if there's any changes in their household. But, throughout the year, they need to let me know.
Great example there on the in-between jobs. I think that's something that it is a hard emotional time and people get so focused outright on protecting income, but there's some pieces of the healthcare part there you want to pay attention to. Because I know people who all of a sudden get their premium because they sign the COBRA paperwork and they're like, I can't afford this, right? I have no or less income and my insurance just like, now what? Like I'm so screwed. And so again, I advocate for like you may have a great work policy, just get to know Joe and get to know a health broker who can just be on your side. And so when you have that life moment, even if at that moment Joe may have nothing going on with you, but he's on your team and you can say, hey, you know what? I know we couldn't work together because my health plan was amazing at work and I didn't want any extra stuff. Now you have the moment to call and say, hey, now I have no clue what we're doing. Help. And that's when Joe can step in and he doesn't mind that. They don't mind, right? So make sure that on your team, you've got that insurance broker. And this goes for your home and auto as well. I know a lot of people just kind of set their autos, set their renters, and they just kind of leave it. And year over year, they just renew and keep paying their bill. And it's like, well, when's the last time you went and shopped or had a conversation or looked at like, oh, I paid my car off or I bought 3 cars or my teenager's about to start driving, right? So same thing, make sure you have that relationship with your insurance agent and you're having those conversations. So let's talk about elderly. And so I know we talk about Medicare a little bit and like, what do elderly people need to know? I think often they feel like they're forced into an option, but there are choices for them.
There's really there's one big decision they need to make, and that is whether to go original Medicare or with a Medicare Advantage plan. And there's a lot of misinformation that goes back years, decades with Medicare Advantage plans because they didn't used to be as good as they are now. It's really easy to get into the weeds with Medicare, but at the end of the day, it's just the same as under 65. It literally costs you nothing to work with me. And as a matter of fact, I get paid the exact same no matter which carrier you go with, and that goes with everything, right? So I'm not incentivized to even move you to a certain place, right? And really, it just comes down to doctors, drugs, and location, right? So what county are you in? What doctor do you like to go see? And what are your prescriptions? Once we have that information, we can make a determination on what is best for you on the Medicare side. If there's any, Medicare eligible people or people turning 65 this year on this, watching this, we actually are going to be starting Medicare events, so educational events. And I will just take you through my 101 class and just in very layman's terms, how does this work? What does this look like? What's it going to cost me? And then just take you through how Medicare works. And we'll be doing that probably twice a month. I'll be doing one class. Lizette will be doing a class for that. And so, we'll be, information will be forthcoming on that. Also, for the rest of open enrollment for Medicare, which is January 1st to March 31st, I will be at the Spark Senior Center every single Thursday from 9 to 12 p.m. or a.m. So if you want to come play some cards, drink some coffee, and shoot the breeze with me to just kind of ask the questions about how this whole thing works, what's the process look like. I'm actually working with Aetna Medicare for that event, and Aetna's got some really good plans and some fantastic customer service. And they've been a great partner for me. So either way, I am reachable in person at these events, specifically talking about Medicare. But at the end of the day, Medicare Advantage plans are really good. And, they're really low cost. Most of them have $0 a month, and they give you dental, vision, hearing, and all that included. And all you got to pay is your Part B premiums, which this year is $164.90 a month. So life gets a lot better on Medicare. I always say it's the best part about getting old.
That's awesome. And again, I just want that demographic to understand, like, it does get complex because to your point, right, they have to decide, like, do I just get what I'm served or do I actually go out and make decisions and get something that fits my scenario? I don't want to change doctors. I need to make sure this medication's covered. So those are great examples. You brought up something there that I was going to move to next. So it's great. So dental and vision as add-ons, like, should I get them? Should I not get them? Like, how do those, I don't know. Like they're the two programs that I hear such mixed reviews on. I think there's a lot of chatter online. So Like when should I look at those? Should everyone look at them?
Everyone needs dental and vision insurance. I mean, vision, at least to get your eyes checked. I mean, we're looking at screens all day, reading tiny letters on a cell phone all day long, right? Everybody's vision is going to get worse. And I'd say, like, I don't have statistics, but if I had to look at a graph, it would make sense to me if everybody's got, there's more people with glasses today than ever before. With that being said, dental insurance is really essential because your mouth health affects the rest of your body. If you got periodontal disease or whatever, that actually affects your heart, that affects your blood, that affects your liver and everything else. And, having good oral hygiene and being able to go to the dentist and get things fixed or get teeth pulled or get that filling or whatever, or just dealing with the pain even, it makes no sense to not have it. And we partner with Emeritus Dental for most of what we do on the dental and vision side. I can get in Washoe County, I can get anyone a plan that's $36 a month. And pretty much every dentist in town takes it. And it has a maximum of $2,000 of benefit. 100% preventative stuff is covered. 80% of basic fillings and extractions are covered. And then they cover up to half of like dentures, bridges, crowns, root canals, all the major stuff they cover up to 50% of. And that's better coverage than I could even get somebody for a group for that price. I mean, yeah, you can get that on the group side, but it's going to be $50, $75 an enrollee. And I can get it for $37 a month. Honestly, if I'm saving you money with a tax credit on the Nevada Health Link, if I save you at least $37, go get the dental. I mean, it's really important to have, and the vision is really important to have too. And that's like $8 a person for really good vision coverage as well.
Well, in the dental one, I like the example you gave. And I know that that's where I made the decision when I was self-employed looking at like, do I do it? And it's like, well, wait a second. I pay, let's just say 500 a year, just to pick a number, right? I pay 500 a year for this coverage, but it covers up to 2,000. Okay, well, then if I do my preventative and I end up with a filling, and like in my case, I knew I had a crown, like I'm gonna make money back, right? Like it covers it. And I think to your point, getting those coverages forces you to use them, right? It forces you to be accountable, get in there, get checked up. We want you healthy, we want you happy. And we want to make sure we're avoiding those huge things by doing the maintenance on the front end. So just know that those options are there. You can add them on. They're not super expensive. And again, your broker can talk you through that. They can say, like, let's talk about how often do you go? What problems do you have? Do you have dentures? When's the last time you got them replaced? Are they going to need to be replaced again? And then make sure you're planning well ahead of time, because there is a window, right, where like you can't like enroll today, go to the dentist tomorrow, right?
No, actually you can. Dental is not time bound. It's like like that TriMed plan I was telling you about. It's actually considered ancillary coverage, and I can get you an effective date of tomorrow on the dental. Now, one thing I will say with that is that if you don't currently have dental coverage and you sign up and try to go to the dentist tomorrow, there is a waiting period on the coverages. That's why I specified up to $2,000, up to 50%, because since you can get it anytime, basically you get less coverage if you don't already have dental insurance. But if you're replacing dental insurance with the stuff that I provide, then they will give you credit for that first year. So after a year, you'll go from $1,000 of max benefit to $2,000, and then it's 20% for majors and goes up to 50. Now it's always 100% preventative, but either way, you're not time bound. But we can talk about that, in everybody's specific situation. But you can get it anytime.
Perfect. And I want people to understand that. And I knew that there was that kind of ramp up. And so it's important, again, talk to your agent, right? Let them explain all this stuff, go through it, talk to you about your options, and have someone on your team. Like what I love about, Joe and the team at Aware Benefits is, you can go talk to people, right? You can go sit down and have real FaceTime with real people and not a 1-800 number, and they can actually walk you through it versus calling some number and getting someone who knows nothing about you, nothing about your situation, and they're trying to provide general advice. It's just not going to be the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always joke with my customers. I was like, yeah, now you have a desk you can pound on when you get mad. Just come on over. but really the cornerstone of my business is to build long-term relationships. In insurance, it's, kind of uh, my farmer's district manager told me this when I got into that business. He said it's a get rich slowly scheme, and basically, it's death by a thousand cuts. You got to build little by little. We live off referrals. We live off of word of mouth and just taking care of people, and having the good word being spread, and just building that relationship with people. The cornerstone of my business plan is to be a pillar of the community. And so when I do that, then I win. And when you're happy with me and the plan that you're in, or you're happy with my response when things do go wrong, then I win.
That's awesome, man. And I love what you're doing. And I remember the first time I met you, I love you got that Southern hospitality just vibe. And I don't think some people have that customer service level just ingrained in them, and you do. And so that's my plug and shout out. Like, if you guys want the white glove service, Joe's going to give it to you, and it's going to be awesome. He's going to actually listen and care. So, Joe, two questions I always ask people to wrap up. One is, if you look at your journey, and I know your journey's not hugely long yet, but what's something you would have done different, or some advice for your younger self?
I mean, some advice for my younger self would be to, let it ride, and let yourself come out. Don't worry about the way you come off or anything like that. And, just kind of really just take a chill pill and enjoy the journey more, and get started in insurance at 20, not at 30.
I love that, man. I love it. It's funny. I used to host insurance retreats, right, for a corporate job I had, and we'd have a bunch of agents out there, and 100% of them would say they would have started sooner, but then 100% of them said that they fell into it. And so it's this interesting industry where you never mean to end up in it unless, like, maybe one of your family members was, but then everyone would have started sooner, even on that path. They're like, well, I would have listened to mom and dad and I would have started 5 years ago.
Mhm.
So I love that advice. If you're thinking of making a career change, insurance can be incredibly lucrative. You need to care about people and you need to be in it for the long game. But because you need to be in it for the long game, start now, right? Like,
Yeah,
get into it.
absolutely. Yeah.
And then love the journey, man. I think that that's such sage advice. I think we get caught up in the moment. And so I think that just taking that moment to slow down and be like, look, where am I? Where am I going? And just appreciating where you're at. I think that there's a lot of value in that as well.
Absolutely.
So last question I like to ask, give me a book or podcast recommendation.
Oh boy. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and that's why I'm excited to be on this one, because I'm a former truck driver, so I used to just listen to podcasts. That's just literally was my entertainment for, the whole time I was on the road. But to be completely honest, I would say it has nothing to do with business. It has nothing to do with insurance or anything. But there's this book called Surprise, Kill, Vanish, and it's the story of the CIA all the way from post World War II in the OSS all the way to today. It was done by Annie Jacobson. It took her like 13 years to write it through FOIA documents and all this stuff and all this declassified information. And the lady's voice is just so easy to listen to. She is wonderful to listen to, and it's a really great book. And then, as a secondary thing, my favorite podcast of all time is Dan Carlin's Hardcore History. And this guy is the best American storyteller since Mark Twain. I'm not joking. This guy can really keep you enthralled for like 6 hours talking about Julius Caesar. It's really amazing. And if you want to blueprint your life on a Stoic philosopher or somebody like that, just somebody from history that you want to kind of blueprint your attitude off of, this guy really paints a great picture, and I highly recommend his podcast as well.
Love that. Again, I love that you talk about. I just recorded another podcast, and the answer, actually two recently, have been historic, and I think that that's awesome. And it's a reminder that we can learn a lot through history, right? And so, if you appreciate storytelling, history is a great way to go learn and really understand personalities and conflict resolution and strategy, and all these things happen through history. And so you don't have to just go grab the newest self-help book to get that answer. Like, if you love storytelling and you want to dig into culture and history, you can get the same takeaways from those historical elements as well. And so I love that you reference those. I did one, and I actually just ordered like 5 books from the guy because he recommended like 5 history books, and I was like, these all sound fascinating, and it's not my usual read. but I
Hmm.
like that it's not my usual read because it lets me kind of step out of my world and kind of go for the journey. And then you
Hmm.
have those aha moments as you're listening. So awesome takeaways, man. Hey, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you being open and honest with us and sharing some of your wisdom and your time. I know you are in busy season and you finished one busy season to jump into the next one. So Joe, thanks for the time, brother. Appreciate you.
Yeah, yeah, good to see you, man. Good to see you. Thanks.